This is Geek Gab with your hosts, John, Brian, and me, Daddy Warpig. We are back. Geek Gab for Saturday, March 4th, 2017. I believe this is episode 89. 89. Excellent, awesome, amazing episodes made solely for the joy of you, our audience. Today, our guest is podcaster, audiobook producer, voiceover artist, and a number of other things listed on his blog, which I decided not to read because I don't know that I would have enough time to read all of those things on the show and still get a show in. So I've included a link to his blog in the description so you can go and check out that long list of projects that he is involved in. JimFear138. Now, despite a rumor that was passed around on Twitter, the 138 does not actually refer to the proof level of alcohol that he prefers to consume. Just in case you are wondering, that rumor is false.
But it's only false because you can't find 138 proof liquor in America.
Oh. Before we start harassing Jim with all our questions, though, I want to pause for a second and give my fellow hosts a chance to say hi.
Hey, everybody. It's good to be back. Good to have you on, Jim. What's going on? It's a good week for me. There's a game release that I'm looking forward to. I hope to talk about it in future weeks. For anybody who's interested in nostalgia, there's a Steam game that was just finished called River City Ransom Underground.
Ooh.
You guys ever played the old River City Ransom on your Nintendo? Not
on Nintendo, but I have played it.
Oh, fantastic! They redid it. They added a bunch of characters, mini combos, and things. Just check it out on Steam. I'm gonna give it a play, and I'll let you guys know next episode. So that's what I'm looking forward to.
Go ahead.
No, go ahead. I insist.
I just started playing the Numenera video game, so I'm hoping that'll be good. It is thoroughly a role-playing game in which you wander around and every single NPC you talk to pretty much drops a new quest in your lap, and you also have heavy item management, which is starting to wear thin for me, I'll be honest. But I hope it's a great game. I really hope I enjoy it.
Oh, looking forward to talking about that next week.
Numenera, of course, the RPG setting by Monty Cook. It's based on the same system, but obviously they changed it for the video game. So, yeah, very strange setting. So I'm hoping it's very much inspired by Jack Vance books.
Now we're talking.
The Dying Earth, very much inspired by the Dying Earth. The setting is, although it's more Dungeons and Dragons in ethos than pulp in ethos. It's even more cyberpunk necessarily in ethos. It's not as action-packed as you might expect hearing Jack Vance's name.
Well, if you know the background of Numenera and the people who are behind it and everything, that makes sense. Monty Cook, the guy behind Numenera, is the guy who basically wrote Dungeons and Dragons 3. Which was a great, if a little bit of a crunchy system, and so that's quite a pedigree.
Brian is Brian here? Has he talked?
Yeah, hi.
He's decided to be the silent partner of the show now.
Brian, are you doing okay? Sounds like you're under the weather today.
Oh no, it's mainly just allergies, but so it's the fact that I was up late last night working on my project for Castalia House, so I got about 3 hours of sleep. Oh
no. All right. I have a story I want to tell before we let Jim talk, because this is the most internet story that is ever interneted. It's amazing. It's astounding. Those of you in the audience, you might have heard it. Nintendo just released a new console, the Nintendo Switch.
I know where this is going.
Whose unofficial mascot, by the way, is a little dog, because apparently the two Switch controllers look like dog's ears when you put them together and stuff. And Nintendo is apparently upset because there's a lot of fan art about the dog, and I only read the headline, so I don't know. I haven't verified this. I don't want to verify this because there are just some things I'm happier not knowing. Apparently, Nintendo is upset because there's a lot of quote-unquote sexy art of the dog. Now, that's not really pertinent to the rest of the story. I'm just throwing it out there to show you exactly what the internet is like, so you can prepare your mind for the glory that is the rest of this story. So, Nintendo made the Switch, and they're gaining cartridges, which used to be huge, right? They used to be about half the size of a paperback novel back when I was young. But their gaming cartridges now are the size of SD cards, which are basically slightly larger than a postage stamp. They make this new console with SD cards as cartridges, and the problem is, and this is wise of them to anticipate the problem. I'm not criticizing Nintendo for anticipating a problem. They thought ahead and said, you know what? SD cards are small, and they constitute, as quarters do, a choking hazard for children. And so we want to be responsible as a company to ensure that children do not choke on our SD card gaming cartridges. So what they did, and this is brilliant, what they did is they found the worst tasting chemical in the world. Like literally the worst tasting chemical you can put in your mouth without dying immediately afterwards. This is the most foul substance in existence. It has been specifically engineered to be bad tasting. And more than that, it lingers. You put it in your mouth, and not only does it taste bad, it tastes bad for apparently up to several hours afterwards, no matter what else you eat. So Nintendo has a safety feature, and the internet, because it's the internet, the very first thing they do when they get a hold of these cartridges with the worst, most foulest tasting chemical in existence, what they do is they lick them. They lick them. Now, I don't know how that conversation went, because I can't imagine being part of that conversation. Hey, this is the worst thing in existence. I imagine it's kind of like that line from Dumb and Dumber. Do you want to hear the most annoying sound in the world? Well, the obvious answer is no, I do not want to hear the most annoying sound in the world. And likewise, if someone holds out a copy of Zelda and says, do you want to taste the worst taste in all of human existence? My immediate response is not going to be, hell yes, give me some of that. Just, I must be crazy, because there's many people whose response was, well, I'm kind of curious as to what the worst taste in the world actually tastes like. So if you're wondering, people commenting about the Switch, about the cartridges, about licking the cartridges, that's where it comes from. It is the internet. So that's my story I wanted to share because I thought it was the most internet-y thing ever.
I mean, I I'm kind of dumb, so I'm not any kind of standard for anybody, but I'm kind of curious as to what the taste is like, but I wouldn't lick the cartridge, maybe like lick my finger and rub it on the cartridge and then lick my finger again just to see what it is. Like I wouldn't be sticking a Zelda game in my mouth or anything like that. Like, I don't know what's going through these people's heads. Just, oh, this tastes really bad. Well, the first thing I'm going to do is obviously put this in my mouth. Brilliant.
I would, even if I wanted to taste it just out of sheer curiosity, I would take steps to limit my exposure
Mm-hmm.
So I was getting just like a minimal amount of exposure, not, you know, not live testing to see what it was like to be a 5-year-old kid who put it in his mouth. I just, call me crazy. So, all right. Jim has been talking, folks. Go ahead, and Jim, introduce yourself to the audience here.
Hi, everybody. I'm JimFear138. I'm not really anybody special, so I'm kind of baffled as to why y'all want to have me on the show, but I'm happy to be here nonetheless, and I'm grateful to you guys for inviting me on. It's been a lot of fun so far, and I'm looking forward to the rest of the show. But I'm an audiobook producer primarily. I used to be a YouTuber, and I got into creepypasta narration back when I was just doing YouTube as a hobby while I was in college, and I really enjoyed telling these stories. I really had no idea what I was doing technical wise, but the actual act of telling stories to people on the internet was really, really fun to me. And I would try to set it up where it would be, you know, not just some guy reading a story with creepy music in the background. Like I would add sound effects and stuff like that. And I got out of college and I kept doing that for a while, and my YouTube quote unquote career kind of fell off for a while. And then I started doing audiobooks because a friend of mine introduced me to the Audiobook Creation Exchange, which is run by Amazon, which is how they get most of their audiobooks for Audible. And I saw that and I was like, yeah, I could probably do this as a career. I mean, I already have the microphone set up and everything, so why not? And I got a couple of jobs that way, and I put out like 5 books last year. They're all on Audible, but 3 of them are through ACX, and the other 2 were a commission from Aaron Clary. And then things, you know, over the course of last year, things really started to come together, and I'm doing audiobooks on the side now. And I also work with Laughably Dapper. Laughably Dapper, which is they're trying to put together a comedy podcast with like superheroes, and it's like a parody of like Marvel and DC, and they do like a Guardians of the Galaxy parody, and you know they have this comedy horror thing set in the far future that they're doing. So it's going to be really good once we finally get everything nailed down. Other than that, I do a weekly podcast. I do book reviews, and that's kind of about it. I also talk a lot of smack on Twitter.
Now, I'm curious. This isn't necessarily pertinent to anything, but are you actually drinking right now?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's a little bit early for me, but this is a special occasion, so I figured why not.
Are you technically drunk right now, or just, you know, a little bit buzzed?
Just a little bit buzzed. I mean, I can get drunk if you want. I got the bottle right here.
That's okay.
I was just curious. Because I will admit, and I don't know how I found the time to do this, but I listened to your entire podcast with Jeff Rowe.
Oh yeah, that was so much fun to put together. Which, by the way, thanks again, Jeff Rowe, for coming on. That was a lot of fun. We'll have to do it again sometime. Oh,
I'm going to throw this out, folks. By the way, we had Razorfist, Jeff Rowe, and John C. Wright on the show a couple of weeks ago, like the epic hour-and-a-half show. John C. Wright has agreed to come back on if we to get those 3 back together again. So. Again, that won't happen until sometime in the middle of April. So
that was an amazing show, by the way. Everybody should go and listen to that after this one is over.
Now let me explain why I invited you back on the show, because I have met a lot of colorful individuals through the Pulp Revolution discussions on Twitter, on Google Plus, recently on Castalia House. I've written a couple of pieces for Castalia House, so you know, people want to check that out. It's
not like you're blowing up the front page or anything.
I've written a couple of small pieces for Castalia House, and we meet a lot of people in the comments of these pieces. So I've been interested to kind of, you know, the people I've gotten to know really well, who I haven't already had on the show. I've been asking on the show one at a time, and then anybody, you know, other authors that I know or who know that Brian knows have also agreed to come on. But that's why I asked you to come on, is because I met you through the Pulp Revolution. It's not necessarily that we have to talk about it, but I thought, hey, he's interesting. Why not have him on the show? because
I've been following you since Gamergate, and it's probably been like, I don't know, 2 years since I started following you, maybe a little bit less. But I never really used Twitter before like last year. But I figured that if I'm going to do this audiobook thing independently and not go with like a production company or something like that, or try to get, jobs elsewhere, try to get commission work, I'm going to need to step up my online presence. So I started using Twitter a little bit more frequently.
Oh, so it's just a coincidence. You didn't jump on Twitter because it was 2016 like the rest of us.
No, I did not. I did not jump on Twitter because it was current year.
2016 was a very special year. We'll never forget it.
I want to give you a chance because I love it when you talk about this. I want to give you a chance to talk about it. I hear there's a really great audiobook of The Lord of the Rings on Audible.
Okay. Actually, like I have mixed feelings about that audiobook. My biggest problem with it is that it's the only one. All of the rest of the stuff on Audible, at least, is dramatization. So they're like 3 or 4 hours, and usually they have a full cast or something like that. That one is all read by one guy, and he's got a great storyteller voice. It's like Stefan Rudnicki, who's someone I have a little bit of a grudge against, but I'll set that aside for now. He's got a great storyteller voice. You could sit there and listen to this guy read a story for hours. He's not exactly the most exciting or entertaining voice, but he really has the perfect voice for The Lord of the Rings. Unfortunately, the dude doesn't do voice acting, so it's kind of difficult to differentiate between dialogue and prose. And the recording is not the best. There's, very little editing done. I can't tell if he flubbed lines and they cut it out, because it sounds like a solid audio file where the guy just sat down and read for like 2 hours and didn't make any mistakes, which is a phenomenal achievement. But I listen at work on my earbuds, so I hear everything. And there's like construction work going on in the back of this recording, and like people walking through the room. I think I heard a dog at one point. I've heard dishes clanging around. Like you just like the Fellowship of the Ring up until they get to Elrond's house, which I can't remember the name from. I'm blanking on that for some reason.
Rivendell, also known as the last homely house east of the sea.
Yes, Rivendell. Before they get to Rivendell, you can hear just about all of the problems that I'm talking about. From that point on, it's off and on, but I was listening to that and it got under my skin so bad that I kind of went psycho on Twitter for, I don't know, about 15 minutes. Did a little tweet storm trying to get my frustrations out about that. Because like my opinion on this kind of thing is when I produce an audiobook, I try very hard to get every line read perfectly. I do multiple takes if I have to. I try to give each character a distinct voice, and I cut out breaths and mouth noises as much as possible. So occasionally there's some that you're not going to be able to, like occasionally your mouth will click, and there's just nothing you can do without going back and re-recording it. And if you re-record that line and then put it in, it's going to have a different sound, and it's going to be obvious that that's an edit, and it kind of breaks immersion. So maintaining sense of immersion in an audiobook is one of my biggest priorities when I produce one. And I try very, very hard to make it sound as professional as possible with the limited knowledge and setup that I have. And to hear somebody do one of the greatest stories ever written in the English language and have it put together so sloppily is just personally offensive. Like, yeah, I was triggered. that triggered me right there. I was very upset about that because, in my opinion, not just J.R.R. Tolkien himself, but the work itself deserves more respect than that. And if you can't bring that level of respect to a project, don't even try. Just go home. And like if they had got a competent editor for that audiobook and then got like voice actors to do the individual characters and then put it together as this big production of the, unabridged audiobook, it would have been great. Because the guy, like I said, the guy has a great prose reading voice. His voice acting isn't great. He doesn't do voices. It's hard to differentiate between characters. It's just, there's so many problems that I have with that audiobook. But it's the only unabridged audiobook of The Lord of the Rings out there, so you're kind of stuck.
How is the Dune audiobook? Because it has a cast. I mean, it's fully voiced. Did they do a good job with that, or is it?
I haven't listened to the Dune audiobook yet, but some things I do know. I have read reviews on Audible of it, and apparently they had a full cast for parts, and then they got the narrator Scott Brick, who is a consummate professional. He's amazing. I've got his audiobook of Lord Fowl's Bane, which is the first Thomas Covenant book, which is excellent. You should all go read or listen to that audiobook. Scott Brick does an amazing job. He's a great narrator. It's very professionally done. There's like very few. I didn't hear a single flubbed lines, and the mouth noises and breaths are kept to an absolute minimum. So given the quality of Scott Brick's work, which you can find him at brickbybrickaudio.com, but given the quality of Scott Brick's work, I would recommend picking up the Dune audiobook, but just be aware, according to the comments that I read of people that have listened to it and reviewed it, there are parts in that book where he just reads everything, and there are other parts where it actually has a full cast. So you're kind of, 1 foot in, 1 foot out with that one.
You said something interesting when you were talking about doing your own recordings. It sounds like when you work on a book, you're maintaining a balance between immersion and quality of sound, saying that you re-record things occasionally and everything. So when you're doing a book, what's your breaking point? Do you record paragraphs at a time, or chapters at a time, or something else?
Usually the way I do it, I have 2 audio software setups that I use. I use Audacity. This is just my personal stuff. When I'm working with my partner, Christopher Warren at dimensionbucket.com, he's the sound engineer over there, and he's better than I am. So if anybody wants a really good audiobook done and you want it read by me, go through dimensionbucket.com, because we'll be able to hook you up with, he's also a music composer, and he does music tracks for the books that we put together. And his audio editing, well, I do the actual editing, like cutting out flubs and stuff like that, and voice, mouth noises and breaths. But he mixes everything, and he's a much better mixer than I am. So when I record my personal audio projects, I record in Audacity, which is a free software that you can find just by Googling Audacity. And I like Audacity because its noise removal function is total slash and burn. So you get a good 10 seconds or so of room tone, which is just complete silence at the beginning of the recording. And then you select that and you run the noise removal program, and it cuts everything out, and it sounds great. And then I take it into Reaper, which is the most user-friendly audio editing interface I've ever had experience with. It's way better than Audacity for editing, and stuff like equalization and compression and stuff like that. But I'm sorry, what was the question? I kind of got.
I was just trying to figure out. No, that's really fascinating. I was just trying to figure out how do you break it up? How do you maintain that quality while still keeping the immersion?
Well, usually the way that I run it is I actually built a sound booth. Well, you could be really charitable and call it a sound booth. I call it my audio slave tent, because I just went to Lowe's and picked up some lumber and set up this little box over my computer and draped some blankets and a sleeping bag over it. And then whenever I want to record something, I just cut off my air conditioner, pull down the flaps on the side, the blankets on the side, and then I do it by chapter. So I'll start out with the opening and ending credits, and usually I'll put that in one track and then cut it into 2 so I can send it off properly to whoever I'm doing the audiobook for. But when I get to actually recording the whole thing, I'll do full chapters. And a secret to recording audiobooks that you don't hear a whole lot is turn the gain on your mic down. Because there are certain people out there, like, once again, Stefan Rudnicki, who's someone that I have problems with. He records everything in a complete monotone voice. So when he's telling a story, there's one out on I don't remember if it was Nightmare Magazine or the science fiction fantasy one, but it's about the greatest hitman in the world. And it doesn't have any character dialogue. It's just a story, you know, like I guess third person omniscient is the perspective about this hitman who lives on an island, and people come to him and ask him to do hits for them. With that kind of book, or with a book like Aaron Clary's Enjoy the Decline, he would do very well with that kind of book because there's not really any dialogue that you have to record. But when it comes to dialogue, my personal approach is to do voice acting. And sometimes it calls for a character to yell. So what I'll do is I'll turn the gain on my mic way down and then back up from the mic a little bit. And then I'll put on the voice and I'll scream the line out. And I'll try to scream it about 5 or 8 different times, basically until the audio stops clipping. And once I get an unclipped version of the line, then I can use that, and it'll still sound like the character is screaming at the line at some. Like the Catherine Kimbridge Chronicles is kind of military sci-fi, kind of. So there are a lot of like Marines and grunts, and you know they do a lot of that hoorah stuff. So I try to bring that across in the performance. But usually I'll just go by chapter and I'll read it out. And as I'm going, if I screw up a line, then I'll go back and I'll re-record the line. And I'm not one of those people who will speak in an audiobook recording like I'm speaking right now, like I'm talking and then, you know, I'll take a breath like that and continue. I don't do that. I take deep breaths and then I read the line and then I stop and then I take a deep breath and then I read the next line and then I take a deep breath and I read the next line. And then when I go in and I do my editing, I cut all of those deep breaths out and I put everything closer together so it flows, you know, not exactly like natural speech, but enough to maintain the immersion of the storytelling. And then when I get to dialogue, if I have to take a breath in the middle of dialogue or, you know, sigh because it says, you know, this character sighed and then, you know, there's a sentence of dialogue, I'll start that line of dialogue off with a sigh to make it seem like, you know, this is actually a performance. This isn't just some guy reading a book.
Well, for anyone who thinks that there isn't an art form to voice acting, folks, take a lesson. One thing I was going to ask Jim, what's your avatar?
Oh, my avatar is my creepypasta persona from back when I was recording creepypasta, which I won't touch with a 10-foot pole now for various reasons. But back then, I have a friend, Lethal Aurora Mage, and she's a very, very good artist. I don't know if she's doing commissions. You know, you might have to find her DeviantArt account or her Tumblr or something like that and ask her about it. But she offered to do a character for me, a persona, so that I could be like the rest of the narrators. Because if you go into the creepypasta narration community, everybody has an avatar. Mr. Creepypasta has one. Creepypasta Jr. has one. Miss Shadow Lovely has one. All of these people have, you know, an avatar, and that's how they kind of present themselves, and they maintain the mask. And I didn't have one. I was just kind of running around with a Zero avatar from Mega Man X. And she make me one, and I was like, well, I can't really pay you. And she's like, no, you're a friend. I'll go ahead and do it for you. And she came back with that because she knew I smoked. So I don't know what the backstory is there. I never really came up with one, but I thought it looked really, really cool. And I really appreciate her doing that for me. So I just started using that as my general avatar. She also made the chibi avatar that I use on Twitter.
Everything that you're talking about as far as editing things together is exactly why we do this show live and not recorded. About a year before I started doing Geek Gab, me and Dornall sat down and did like 3 different 10-minute, 15-minute segments. And it took me to edit together a 15-minute segment to get things to where it sounded decent. It took me about 3 or 4 hours of work in an editing program. I use Fission on the Mac. And it's a good program. It's not a bad program at all. I've used far worse programs, but I am not willing to sit there for 6 hours and edit this show to make it audio perfect. That's just way too much time. And the only way I could give myself a reason to not have to do that is to broadcast the show live. Then I don't have to worry about it. I'm not going to do that.
I totally understand. I would do the same thing with my podcast. It would make things a lot simpler. Like if you listen to Aaron Clary's podcast, which by the way, he does curse. Like he has a the Curseful and the Curse Free podcast. So he does like 2 podcasts a week. But he doesn't edit anything. He just sits there with the microphone and he talks into it for like an hour, hour and a half. And then he just uploads the full audio file. I can't do that because I have, I'm kind of, you're probably getting a taste of that in this podcast, but I have a lot of pauses and ums and ahs when I speak. And I think I would be doing a disservice to the audience if I just left all of that in. Like doing a live show is different because you're trying to get a flavor of the person as they are, without, any bells and whistles or any editing or anything like that. But when it's my own personal production, I don't feel like subjecting people to 10-second long silences followed by, so yeah, where was I? That kind of thing happens very frequently when I'm recording, and I just go in, usually I'll record on Thursdays and I'll go in and edit that part out. And if I don't have enough time to edit the whole thing, like if I do an extra long podcast and I've got Friday to record, then I try to get it uploaded on Saturday. So I try to give myself a little bit of time to get everything polished up. I don't feel like doing this audio dump where it's just completely, 100% stream of consciousness with no edits at all. It just seems kind of unprofessional to me. But like I say, your method is completely different, and there's nothing, necessarily better about my approach. So I'm not trying to slam you guys for the way that you do things over here on Geek Gab. It's a great show, and I do love listening to it.
Well, that's no insult at all. On the other podcast I used to be on semi-regularly, we just record on the fly. And first everybody else would just get all liquored up, just get pretty buzzed. And we just go at it for like 3 hours. And it's like, oh, no, someone just walked in and slammed the door. Yeah, that's okay. Keep going. Oh, the cat knocked over a bunch of stuff in the background. Yeah, that's fine. We'll get it in post. We'd never get it in post. There was no post.
I don't drink alcohol. I'm LDS, so I don't drink alcohol. But one of the things I've noticed is that when people are kind of nervous or stiff, that they're being on the air makes people nervous and stiff, and they're a lot less relaxed. The conversation flows a lot more roughly than it does when you're just talking to them off the air. And so I can understand why someone taking a drink or two before doing a podcast would actually help, because it kind of, for some people, it kind of relaxes them, kind of loosens them up.
Yeah, that's honestly why I'm drinking right now, because I respect all of you guys a lot, and I have no idea why you wanted to get me on the podcast. So I was a little nervous going into it. Oh my God, why did these guys want to talk to me? So I just had a little bit of whiskey to kind of even things out and cut down on the nervousness and that kind of thing. So
well, you did a glowing review of an ethereal. So the flattery will get you everywhere.
It's good enough.
I did enjoy that book immensely. I literally could not put it down. There were times where I would walk around my house with my Kindle in front of my face, and I would trip over tables and stuff because I was concentrating on the story so much.
Well, it's a good thing that you did, because I gave Brian crap for this a lot when I first read it, is that I did put the book down. I took a month break in between starting it and finishing it. And when I picked it back up, I was like, I have no idea what any of this is and what's going on. And it made it that much harder to read through the end.
Also, the sinister conspiracy of your cat.
Yeah, the cat didn't freaking help either.
I don't think we've had another voiceover artist on the show, other than Adam Baldwin. But I don't think he counted as a.
Yeah, he's more of a straight actor.
Yeah, I mean, he did a great job with Larry Correa's Tom Strange book. Did a great job, but he wasn't producing it himself.
Oh, really? Adam Baldwin read one of Larry Correa's books?
Yeah.
He read Larry Correa's short story. It's an Audible original, so it's only available on Audible right now. It's his Tom Stranger Interdimensional Insurance Agent.
I have got to pick this up.
It is phenomenal. It is amazing. Adam does a bunch of different voices, and at one point you remember the sergeant from Full Metal Jacket that Baldwin was in?
Yeah, R. Lee Ermey.
Yeah, he does an imitation of R. Lee Ermey because he's a character in the story, and it is spot on. It is amazing.
That's awesome.
He also does a manatee at points.
Yes.
Wait, that's an
I've got
actual
to hear
thing.
this.
That's not just a Twitter thing. That's an actual thing. Amenity.
A manatee, they're real creatures. They really exist in Florida.
No, that's not what I mean.
They're actually mermaids. A lot of people don't know that.
It'll make sense.
So, but yeah, we haven't had an audio producer. Really, someone did. So it's a new subject we can talk about. We try to keep things, try to change things up. So let me ask you this question. How did you get involved? We're over time, and I've officially declared I don't care right now. Then again, I've only had 4 hours of sleep. Now, I haven't had 3 like Brian, but I have only had 4. So I'm a little bit, I'm emulating a slight level of drunkenness right now. So,
well, I'm good to go for as long as you guys are. I have nothing to do today, so
I did want to talk a little bit about the Pulp Revolution before we go. How did you get involved in that? How did you hear about that?
Honestly, I don't remember. I'm really bad with remembering how I met people and how I, got into certain things. I'm just horrible because it happens and then it becomes a part of my life and then it's there and I don't worry about what happened in the past. I'm here now. As I can remember, and I might be a little off, but I started using Twitter, and of course I follow you, Daddy Warpig. And I think you started talking about Kirsova. You started reblogging Kirsova magazine. And I went and checked it out, and it looked really, really cool. And the guy who runs the account, Alexander, seems like a really, really cool guy. So I started following his Twitter, and I picked up a couple of issues of the magazine, and I saw the Pulp Revolution stuff going around. And then through Kirsova and you, I found like Brian and like PC Bushi and John Mollison and a bunch of other people. And I was like, oh hell, there's a scene developing here. And these people have some really, really, really good fiction. I need to get in on this. So I like science fiction and fantasy has always been something that's been in the back of my life. You know what I mean? It's one of my favorite genres of fiction. I've been reading it since I was a little kid. And it's just kind of always been there. And I had no idea that this whole SJW takeover was going on with the genre for pretty much the entire time I've been alive, plus some years. So I've just kind of grown up in this place where I'll read stuff like Robin Hobb or Douglas Adams or J.R.R. Tolkien or Frank Herbert, and I'll really, really enjoy that stuff. And then the stuff that comes out today is like, okay, well, it's all right, but it's not as good as this stuff that I've been reading, these quote unquote classics. And then this stuff comes out, and, I read Kirsova magazine, and I read Nefarial, and, I'm reading John Mollison's first story. It's amazing. It's great stuff. I didn't know that writers like this still existed. And I've just thought, like, I do a little bit of writing. We're actually going to be publishing stuff in March, hopefully under Dimension Bucket. There'll be a anthology coming out with like 3 short stories from me in it. But
we need to be more of us. We need to grow.
I'm not sure that I'm comparable to, someone like you, Brian, but I decided that, this is something that for all of my life, like Internet Aristocrat said back when Gamergate was happening, when he was releasing his conspiracy videos, these people have come in and defiled something that we consider holy. And for the longest time, I didn't realize it, but sci-fi and fantasy is something that I consider holy. It's had a huge influence on my life. It's my favorite genre of fiction because I don't really distinguish between sci-fi and fantasy now that I've read, Jack Vance. And Nefarial. Nefarial completely blows all of that out of the water. But, this is something that I consider holy. And if I can get in on the movement that's trying to make it actually fun again, that's exactly where I want to be. This is something that I've been looking for a long time. This is for a long time I tried being a YouTuber, or I went to college with the intention of doing, religious sociology, and then that kind of fell through, and I just stopped getting interested in it after a while. And I've just had this long string of things that I thought I was interested in that I could do for the rest of my life. And then this comes along, and it's like, well, this has been in the background of my entire life, literally my entire life. It's been constant throughout all of these things that have come and gone. And this is something that I can definitely 110% do for the rest of I could see myself being an old man still writing, blog posts on my website, or, writing fantasy stories and stuff like that. So I figured that this is where I want to be. If we're going to actually try and make fiction great again, make science fiction and fantasy great again, that's the movement that I want to be associated with, because those people are doing God's work right there. And I would rather be on the side of the angels than the side of the people who want to destroy the thing that I consider holy.
Deus Volt, brother.
I have noticed that the pulp revolution scene is growing really, really quickly.
Oh, definitely. I'm amazed at the podcast that I did with Jeffro. Like, you go on Twitter and you interact. There's I don't know, maybe 20 or 30 of us out there that have varying degrees of interest and involvement. But then I go and I look at the numbers on my website for that podcast that I did with Jeffro. There's over 300 views on that. This scene is a lot bigger than I initially thought it was. And there's a lot more interest than I had counted on.
Well, you know why? I mean, you just got to get these books into the hands of readers. Just consider my case where I come from. Yeah, okay, I picked up Ethereal and read that, because of Brian and the show and everything, and I loved it. And then we had what's his name, Sky Hernstrom on. We talked to him. I went and read that Kursova thing. This stuff is good, especially after I had, in between those two books, I had read A Princess of Mars. I was on a plane trip, and I had that on my Kindle app on my phone. I read A Princess of Mars, and I'm like, wow, this is astounding. And then, and Ethereal and Sky Hernstrom's stuff in the Kursova magazine, and Thune's Vision, right? That stuff compares favorably to stuff like Edgar Rice Burroughs' A Princess of Mars, or at least it's in the same ballpark. And so,
definitely.
I mean, what we're dealing with is the truth. When you just put this stuff in people's hands and say, hey, I know this is old stuff, and I know that they don't always teach this stuff in your English class in school, but check it out. It's really good. And the more people just read this stuff, you don't even have to make any noise or pretense about it. Just, hey, this is good stuff. People are going to keep running.
And I mean, this is kind of a divergence from the point, but you brought up Sky Hernstrom. I'm so grateful that he exists. I absolutely adore Schuler Hernstrom's work, and I keep saying that guy is the Robert E. Howard. He's the Edgar Rice Burroughs of this generation. He's writing stuff that, like, I recently went and read. I hadn't done a lot of reading of Conan before I found the Pulp Revolution, but I recently recorded The Phoenix on the Sword, which is going to be coming out, like I say, mid-March. We're planning this huge dump of a bunch of stuff, and reading that after reading Schuler Hernstrom, it's like, all right, now I see where this guy's coming from. It really, his stories in Thune's Vision really do read like a Conan story. It's crazy how good this guy is, and he needs to keep doing what he's doing. Also, Abraham Strongjohn needs to write more. Just saying. Like, I love his story in Kursova #1, the space princess, science fantasy story that he put together. It blew me away. It was so good. And I went and looked him up on Amazon, and the only thing he's got besides Kursova is a parody story called No Lives Matter, which is a civil rights struggle, featuring Lovecraft monsters. I haven't read it yet. I'm looking forward to reading it, but I was hoping that he might have had like a novel or an anthology of short stories out there like Sky Hernstrom does, but unfortunately not. So that guy needs to write more, but yeah, no, everybody should go and read Schuler Hernstrom's Thune's Vision.
I have a question from the comments, really, really quick. Do you recommend Robin Hobb?
It depends on what you're going for. Robin Hobb's fantasy stuff is kind of, I don't necessarily want to say esoteric. I enjoy her work a lot. The Assassins trilogy, the Live Ship Traders series, and the Tawny Man trilogy. That was the other one. Those are the big three trilogies in her little mythos. But she created her own little world, and she drew maps for it. And there's not necessarily different languages, but the kingdoms that she came up with, and in Assassin's Apprentice and the Assassins trilogy, there's a lot of like court intrigue and stuff like that. So it takes place in a fantasy world, but there's not like elves and dwarves and wizards running around. Like there's only two types of magic in this world, and one gives you the ability to like cure people from long distances and speak to people from long distances, and it's called the skill. And then there's another one called the wit, which the wit is looked down on because it's seen as bestial, and it allows you to communicate with animals and stuff and bond with a certain animal that basically becomes your familiar, but it's a little bit more in depth than that. Like they're your best friend, and like you share minds with them and stuff like that. It's a really, really interesting series. And I recommend her. I think she's a very good writer. Her one real problem with writing is that she likes to do expo dumps. So every book you'll get the backstory. If you pick up the third book in the series, you'll pretty much get the backstory. But it doesn't really compare to actually going and reading it yourself. But if you've read all of the books in the series, there's going to be parts in that book where it's like, why are we talking about this? We already know. But yeah, I would recommend Robin Hobb.
I read The Assassin, I think the first two Assassins books. The third one wasn't published in high school, and I enjoyed them. I tried reading Live Ship Traders about 5 years ago, because Orson Scott Card recommended it heavily, and I couldn't get through the first chapter because it was heavy with world building and stuff. I'm not saying it's bad fantasy. In fact, I want to draw kind of a comparison between it and like the Pulp Revolution stuff. I like books that start moving right out of the gate. There's another author who is very, very big right now, very, very popular, but who just has nothing happening for tens of thousands of words. Nothing happens. And it makes me want to scream. I'm like, can we get some action in here? Is there some combat anywhere near in the future, or at least conflict? Like open... You don't have to have people stabbing each other to have an interesting story. People who are in open conflict socially, like yelling at each other or whatever, trying to get stuff done. It's something to where people are doing something. Can we get that going? And
that's kind of a problem with Robin Hobb's books. Like the Assassins trilogy is a lot more about court intrigue. The Live Ship Traders is more of a romance story, honestly. It's still good. I'm a sucker for romance anyway. I love that kind of stuff. But
you need to read Soul Dancer then. I'm just going to say that.
Oh, I'm going to. I'm going to. I'm just caught up reading Summa Helvetica right now.
Oh, nice.
And again, I'm not saying that makes them bad authors, because they're both quite good authors, both very popular. But it's the theme. This is why I like Pulp Revolution material. Is even like finished Ship of Ishtar by Abraham Merritt, and the very first scene in the book, the guy ends up in this fantastic place. He gets there. It's a very short scene. The second scene in the book is two individuals who are avatars of deities in tough, not fighting, not combat, but in conflict with each other. There's things going on. There's people who have passion and have goals, and they're clashing right on the deck of this mystical ship traveling through this mysterious ocean for various reasons. Right off the bat, he doesn't wait. He doesn't world build.
There's no setup there. It just kind of happens, and you get thrown in feet first, and you better swim or drown.
And it's not complicated. You don't have to understand 5,000 different, Elvish pronouns to understand what's going on. It just starts off with a bang. And I've been told that it's bad form to flag down authors, but I remember I read all 4 volumes of Tad Williams' Otherland series. And I went back to try and read it again, and the first 20 pages in the hardback version of the first book literally nothing happens. The guy is wandering around in what seems to be the trenches of World War I. Literally nothing happens. It's all discussion. It's all description. Nothing goes on. And I'm just thinking 20 pages is too damn long for nothing to be going on in this book.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I'm in my own writing, I'm more of a fan of in media res. Like I found out that was a thing, and I was like, okay, this is obviously how I'm going to do all my stuff from now on. You know, because it's a lot more exciting to start it, you know, throw directly in the middle of the conflict, and then, you know, we'll work out the backstory later. You know, because that really does reach out and grab the reader and pull them in.
You definitely know I approve of that.
I think it was Dashiell Hammett, but if not, it was one of the other noir writers who said, you know, when you're uncertain of what's going to happen in your story, have a man come through the door with a gun. And obviously they're writing like detective stories, something like the Maltese Falcon or whatever. And if you're writing Pulp Revolution, even if you're in a fantasy era, that's really doable. You can do that if you want. Sky Hernstrom has some stuff like that that's really awesome. But think about that in a grander sense, in a larger sense, not literally talking about a man with a, you know, Colt 1911 pistol. If you're at a loss for what's going on in a story, have something happen. And it's something, when someone comes through a door with a gun, what are they talking about? They're immediately threatening the life of your protagonist. There's immediately some combat because the gun's in their hand. They're pointing it at you. There's violent intent, or at least the intent to intimidate.
Yeah, like honestly,
you immediately raise.
Sorry, go ahead.
You immediately raise the stakes for your character. Something happens. They have to respond. That's not something they can just be calm about.
Yeah, like honestly, if you get into a kind of writer's block moment with your fantasy or sci-fi story, you could go to a system like I don't know, like maybe I haven't looked into GURPS, but you could go to GURPS or, you know, Dungeons and Dragons or something like that, and you could just find the wandering monster table. Depending on your personal setting, it's gonna depend, and then you could just roll up a wandering monster that comes by, or make your own table for whenever you get into a writer's block situation, and then, you know, roll on your table, and whatever the dice comes up with, that happens next, and your characters have to deal with it.
And something along similar lines. He was in Rebel Without a Crew. He came up with a method using like index cards to get past writer's block when he's doing a script. So he's like, just, you know, go to the store, get of 3x5 index cards, and have a setting pile and like a character pile and a conflict pile, and, you know, just shuffle them up, just write down, you know, different character archetypes, you know, different settings and stuff, and like, okay, and then you deal them out. You pick one card from each stack. It's like, okay, where are we? Okay, we're in a bedroom. Okay, well, who's there? It's like, okay, the protagonist and the relationship character and the relationship character's wife. Oh, okay, well, what's going on here? Yeah.
That sounds awesome.
It is. He's got a lot of useful tips that also apply to writing, and that's one thing. Getting back to one thing Daddy Warpig was saying, a lot of people conflate action with violence, and they're definitely not the same thing. One is a subset of the other.
Yeah,
you can have it. Yeah, right. You can have a perfectly tense, just edge of your seat, nail biting, white knuckled scene where no fisticuffs are exchanged, there's no gunfire, not even necessarily any words. You just need a tense situation.
You did this very well in Nefarial, especially with the scenes with Suleiman. That character, I really, really enjoyed that character. But yeah, there were a lot of moments in Nefarial where, you know, like people were threatening to do violence, but no violence ever happened. But it was still like, okay, you know, I'm chewing on my nails here. I'm just sliding up further on my seat. You know, what happens next? What happens next? What happens next? You know, And no blows are ever exchanged. No one comes away with a shiner or a bloody nose or anything like that. No one dies, but it's still one of the most intense interactions between this group of characters that you've ever seen in your life.
Well, I thought you did particularly well in the sample chapter you sent me. It's chapter 1 with Nakvin and the other Magus, where she's robbing him. But I thought you infused that with a lot of latent tension.
Thank you. I wasn't really doing that consciously. I was just kind of reading it as it appeared to me. But I appreciate that. And like I say, I hope you're still considering me for the audiobook of that, because I would love to work on Ethereal. That would be a serious feather in my cap right there, just because the book is so good.
All right, folks, we are running out of time. We got about 4 minutes left. So before we take off for today, do you have any last words, Jim?
Not particularly, other than to say, thank you guys a lot for having me on the show. Like I say, I'm still baffled as to why you wanted to talk to me. I'm just some nobody on the internet, but I really do appreciate you bringing me onto the show. It's been nice to actually finally talk to you guys, after interacting with you on Twitter for all of these months. It's good to sit down and have a discussion with you. It's been a lot of fun.
Sorry we were all sleep deprived and everything for you.
Oh, don't worry about it.
Any last words, Brian?
Yeah, wanted to say thanks to Jim for coming on, and also thanks to everybody who participated in John Mollison's 3 for 3 Amazon review bomb yesterday, where participants chose 3 books, preferably by indie authors, and wrote 3 statements about each one. There's a short 3-sentence Amazon review of each one. So got a lot of love for the Soul Cycle. Ethereal is now at darn near 60 reviews, just needs one more. Soul Dancer is over the halfway point to the magic 50 review number, and even Secret King's, the newest one, is climbing up there in terms of the review totals. And
you can still do that today, folks.
Yeah, you can do that anytime.
Yeah, so that can continue. Spread the love around, pay it forward.
Yeah, it really helps. It does. Especially indie authors leaving reviews helps bump up their books in Amazon's algorithm and helps them compete with the big boys.
Any last words, John?
No, I'm good. No, thanks for coming on, Jim. It was great talking to you. Really interesting to hear about sort of the behind the scenes of the business of doing audiobooks. I'm always interested in the behind of the scenes of anything. But it's a great pleasure talking to you, and as always with my co-hosts.
Yeah, no problem. Same to you guys. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Well, let's talk real quick about the future, folks. Right now we have Jason Rennie hopefully scheduled for next week, Rick Stump after that, Rob Crease after that, Yakov Merkin after that, and then Nathan Housley, one of the 3 preeminent historians of the Pulp Revolution, scheduled for sometime in early April, and also sometime in early April, we're hoping a return of the Razor Fist, John C. Wright, and Jeffro to come in and talk some more about pulp history and stuff. So that's what we're looking at. Again, all those are tentative. Things may change, but John C. Wright, again, like I said earlier, has already agreed to come on and do another show. We just have to get a hold of Razor Fist and Jeffro. We are
right before you do the outro. I know that Jeffro is listening, and I wanted to thank him very much for all of the free press essentially that he's given me on his blog and via Castalia House. That does mean a lot, and I would rather thank you in person, but Twitter DMs seem kind of clunky for that kind of thing, or wrong form. I don't know, but I do want to thank you for I guess pimping my blog on Castalia House and your website. So yeah, thanks a lot, Jeffro.
This is Geek Gab, folks. We're here about every week. Generally, we're going to be doing it about the same time, we hope, barring problems and emergencies like happened last week. It's about 3 p.m. Eastern on Saturdays. We're here usually for about half an hour. Come and listen to us live. The benefit of listening to us live is you can, in fact, participate in the chat. There's a lot of great conversations that happen only in the chat. It's not always directly about stuff that's going on in the show. So, come and listen live. get involved in the chat. And if you have questions, we take those and pass them along to the guests so you can get some questions answered. We are available at youtube.com/geekgab, youtube.com/geekgab. Very, very simple. And you can get all 89 episodes of our show, plus one tiny little play stream I did for Fallout 4, just to show some stuff off in Fallout 4. Or we are available on SoundCloud on the internet. You can get us on GeekGab. Just do a search. You can subscribe to the podcast through the iTunes store. Just do a search for GeekGab. And we're also available on the Google Play Store. Again, just do a search for GeekGab. We're available in all of those places. Wherever you like to get your listening from, we have you covered. Thanks for tuning in, folks. We are leaving for today. We're signing out. The conversation is over. But even though we're leaving, don't you fret. We will be back.